Okay, so thank you so much, Student Minister Brother Abel Muhammad, for joining me today. It's a pleasure to have you here. So before we get started with my questions, I would like for you to tell my audience a little bit about yourself.
Well, it's an honor to be with you and those who are watching, dear sister. I'm Student Minister Brother Abel Muhammad, the representative to the Latin American community for the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan in the Nation of Islam, based here out of Mosque Mariam, the headquarters for the Nation of Islam in Chicago, Illinois.
All right, that is wonderful. Very great. So a friend of mine actually told me about you, and I started following you on Instagram. His name is Tony Curtis. He's also a Muslim. Okay,
beautiful
so
brother, yes.
Yes, so he's the one, that told me about you and everything. And I really enjoy your work. I've been sharing some of your videos. And what I want to talk to you about is the relationship between the Black community and the Latin American community, because there seems to be a lot of divisiveness going on lately, a lot of hateful things towards one another, and specifically a lot of hateful things being spewed on social media, and some of this by, commentators. I would like to know, how do you think we came to this point? Because back in the 60s, Fred Hampton from the Black Panther Party actually had formed a coalition with many of them. There was the Black Panther Party, there was the Mexican American Brown Berets, I believe they were called, or I think they were called the Mexican American Brown Berets, and then they had the Puerto Rican Young Lords. And I also saw that some of the Young Lords actually met with Coretta Scott King. And then also Dr. King had relationships with Cesar Chavez. And so there was a coalition, and many of these protests during the civil rights era, the communities got together. And also poor people got together with them. Some of these people were poor white people even. So what do you think happened in recent years to where they've drifted apart and they have angst towards one another? How do you think the ties became unraveled, basically?
Well, dear sister, it's not by accident. There is documented now the counterintelligence program of the United States government, which infiltrated not only Black organizations, but they infiltrated the Brown Berets, the Young Lords, the Nation of Islam. They were afraid of the unity of the different groups. And you see in such famous pictures from the 60s, I was blessed. As a matter of fact, this past weekend, you mentioned Fred Hampton, two of the very young members who was from here in Chicago, and he was murdered by the police here in Chicago. I was blessed to meet two of the brothers that are now elders in the community, but they both joined under Chairman Fred Hampton at the age of 15 years old, the Black Panther Party. And they were telling me about so much of the work that they did. And even back then, they had so much infighting within the organization, as well as having to fight other organizations. When the Panthers were trying to set up health clinics, they had to fight against some of the street organizations that didn't want them there because they were being fed in some instances by government forces that told them, you can't allow the Panthers to do this. And the government has constantly internally been feeding divisions. I was blessed to meet one of the brothers eventually. His name is Brother Stan. He was so disciplined in martial arts and doing security. He eventually was moved to California to be personal security for Minister Huey P. Newton. And people have seen a famous picture from the 60s where you'll see Brown Berets next to the Black Panther brothers. And that was at a Free Huey rally. And speaking on the microphone is a Mexican brother that they've tried to write him out of history, named Reyes Lopez Tijerina, who passed a few years ago. This man, Reyes Lopez Tijerina, was so revolutionary. He raided a courthouse in New Mexico to do a citizen's arrest on the sheriff. And they got into a shootout with the police. And he was eventually, of course, arrested and did some time for that. But it was on the principle that the government was not giving back the lands to the native and Mexican people that they had seized illegally, and they were supposed to give it back to them. He was also, Reyes Tijerina, the man that Dr. King personally picked. And there's a Western Union gram message that was sent to Reyes Tijerina, where Dr. King asked him to lead the contingent from the Mexican community for the Poor People's March, which of course we know Dr. King did not survive to see that come into fruition. He was assassinated. But as you mentioned, we saw a unity forming. We saw bonds being built, and somebody who did not want to see that stepped in and seeded us with division. There was already distrust because of our disconnection from one another. And in truth, dear sister, the reason we have today this great separation is because of white supremacy. White supremacy in the educational system. We are all being fed the same lies. We're producing the same thing. And what we're producing is the mind of white supremacy, and it manifests in our different shades. So you have it enforced or taught to us in education. It's reinforced in almost all of the religious institutions because they work hand in hand. And then of course, the economic and social systems are designed to even further divide us and keep us out. So now we fight over little crumbs, over, what we think may be reparations coming to somebody. What we are told is a check that somebody gets in the mail. And that's why the greatest work of unity that has ever been done and that was begun is by the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. In the teachings that he gave us, even though people call it the Black Muslims, but in the teachings and the core of the Nation of Islam, the Honorable Elijah Muhammad made us fall in love with the term Black, but he also told us that Black is not a race, Black is not a color, Black is not a nationality, Black is the essence from which all color comes. And he taught us and teaches us that all brown, red, yellow people are members of the Black nation. So there's a embedded unity natural to the teachings of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. That's why the enemy hates to raise up his name during Black History Month or any other time. They'll never teach you. They'll raise up Muhammad Ali. They'll raise up Malcolm X, but they will never tell you about the teacher who produced these men. He produced the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan. And so what we're looking at today, dear sister, unfortunately, is the residue of white supremacy. And today it's manifested differently. Today, yeah, we may have taken off the slave master's name, but our thoughts are still embedded in what they've trained and taught us in. So we we take different names, but it's still the same core of our thinking. And what's needed then is a new type of education for us so that we will now produce that which displays self-love and not self-hatred. Anytime we're fed as dark people, white supremacy, what it will produce is different shades of self-hatred. So now everybody's trying to be better based on their relationship and understanding of power as we've been taught under white supremacy. And that will always put us in a position where we're fighting one another for supremacy when that's not our natural way. Our natural way of living is to be at peace with one another and to be at peace with the nature of the creation of the Creator, of the Most High. And what the enemy has done is made us instead fight one another as if there's lack on the planet. All our Lord and Creator has given us is abundance. And they have us thinking in terms of really narrow view of what success is, very narrow view of what a man is, what a woman is, what Black is, what white is, what all of the shades are. And we try to define ourselves based off of what they've taught us. And what they've taught us always puts all of us in an inferior position with only partial knowledge. And what we need is complete knowledge and root knowledge, a knowledge of ourselves. And if we had that, we wouldn't produce hatred and self-hatred of one another. We would produce a natural bond of brotherhood and sisterhood, as you saw in the 60s and 70s. And it's beginning to come up again. I see it here in Chicago, but that's not what is, pushed before our eyes by these talking heads and the media. They are pushing another narrative, which will pit us against one another to do the enemy's dirty work for them, because the enemy knows that if we unite, we won't have to fight them physically. We don't have to pick up a weapon. Our numbers are so great. We do outnumber them 11 to 1 on the planet when we're united. But when they divide us,
Absolutely.
when we're divided into 40 and 50 and 60, 70 different types of people, we're easy to pick off. And that's what you see happening right now.
Absolutely. I absolutely agree. And that has always been the enemy's tactic because it's always worked, divide and conquer.
Yes,
And
right.
it's like you said, it's very easy for them to continue this when they can get our own people from both groups to turn against one another and to spew their own wanton supremacist talking points.
And
So
most of the time, dear sister, it's based, unfortunately, even those who, like I said, they change their name to an indigenous name, to an African name. But at the core of it, it's based on their knowledge of their own people from some white anthropologist, from some white researcher, or a Black researcher that was trained and educated by a white one. So we're still being fed incomplete knowledge, half learned. And so it leaves us really in a position where we're really vulnerable, because now we're putting all our eggs in the basket that an enemy has made for us, when in truth, our history, they can't even find the beginning of it. So why would we go into their schools to learn about our people? It doesn't make sense. And they would never teach it to us, because why would they teach us that which we need to stand up on our own and be free of them, when they absolutely desire to keep us in servitude to them in every way imaginable?
Absolutely, absolutely. Beautifully said. You know, it reminds me of a quote from Assata Shakur. She said, we should never allow our enemies to dictate who our enemies are. And when our own people start spewing their racist rhetoric, their hateful talking points, and being divisive amongst ourselves, that is absolutely what we're doing. We're allowing them to tell us who the enemy is. And rather than us standing up against them, who are confederate against us collectively, we're against each other. And we can never win that way. So another thing I want to talk to you about is, you know, there was a study done at Duke University. Now, they say Latin immigrants often hold negative views against Black people. The study also found that sharing neighborhoods with Blacks reinforce these feelings, and that basically they feel that they have more in common with white people. Can you tell me what you think about that? Why you think that is, that some of them may feel more comfortable dealing with white people or have more in common with them?
You know, and I think, again, not that it doesn't exist, but it's because of the way Black people are portrayed in the media. When you go to places, for example, like Mexico, where until the last census, they didn't even acknowledge African presence there. There was no such thing as an Afro-Mexican until the very last census, in the last few years. Even though there was an acknowledgement sort of in a historical kind of a storybook kind of way of the presence of Black people, because Mexico's always talks about the three roots, with the Spaniard, the indigenous, and they always refer to the third root as the African that was brought here in slaves. However, that doesn't take into account pre-Columbus interaction between the people of Africa and the people of the Western Hemisphere. And that is something that is written out of history and Mexicans don't know about. So you have a sort of internal conflict going on, because there are certain things that are in our DNA. For example, the song La Bamba, that is very famous Mexican traditional song. Yet it is actually a song that was like the slave, you know, hymns of the North in Mexico. It was similar. It was the song that the slaves that were brought, or the people of Africa that were brought into slavery in Mexico at the time, they were singing this song about La Bamba, about a region from Angola where they were from. But they had to hide it in a song. Most Mexicans don't even know that that's the root of the song. They don't know that this was the song that the slaves were singing, and now it's become part of us, part of our DNA, because we shared in the suffering. Before Black people were brought from Africa to America, the indigenous people, the Caucasians who came, attempted to enslave them. And it only worked to a degree. And that's why they went and got our brothers and sisters from Africa, because they wanted the labor. And us knowing this land, us knowing this territory, we knew where we could go to get away from them to some degree. And that's why you have so many who know the history that amongst the native people, Black people were allowed to find refuge amongst the Cherokee, forming the Seminole. That is absolutely created and a wonderful illustration of the natural unity that occurs. And there are some who will remind the world when they look at the records that some of the tribes were involved of the purchase of slaves. And it's true, but there's also Black people that were involved in the purchasing of slaves. Right. The purchasing of slaves is not an indictment. Many of those who purchased quote unquote slaves, they did it so that they wouldn't be in the hands of Caucasian people. They didn't treat the Black man in the same manner that the white man did. We didn't deprive them of their name, their culture, their religion, and their God. We, in many instances, treated them as you would any servant of that time. And in many cases, they married into the families. That's not what the Caucasian people did, and you cannot compare it. Just because two things look the same on paper, you have to look into it and examine it and see, is this the same? And we can unequivocally say, these are not equal things. When another Black person, when an indigenous person would do these acts on paper of purchasing another human being, yes, it is absolutely immoral. But if you're doing it to save them from the punishment of being purchased by a Caucasian, and you eventually free them, isn't it then something that had to be done for a greater purpose? And overwhelmingly, the history of the native people with Black people that were brought here is not one of us further terrorizing them because we were terrorized by the same enemy. It is of us finding bonds between them. That's why if you go amongst the Blackfoot, if you go amongst the Lakota, if you go amongst even if you go into South America, amongst the Maya and amongst the Aztec, and you look inside the pyramids, inside the pyramids, you find images of Black soldiers and warriors fighting alongside their brownish and reddish skin-toned brothers and sisters. So we know that there's much hidden from us. And unfortunately, we get a little bit of knowledge. Or even worse, we get no knowledge and we're fed by the enemy's media, social media and their overt mainstream media, all of which are used to subtly and not so subtly try to pit us against one another. So imagine being in Mexico or one of these places where you don't interact with the Black man and woman of America, and your only insight into the Black man and woman of America is through Hollywood. Right. What would be your perception of them?
It would definitely be negative.
Absolutely. And it's the same thing they've tried to do here. It's changed a little, but not really. They want you to think that all Latin American people want to do is party, and we do like to party. But who doesn't? There's not a people on the earth that don't like to party to some degree or another. They want you to think that they somehow got some easy road. Yeah, they want to identify with white people because white people are seen as the pinnacle of success. Who wouldn't want to be that? But it's because we're not being taught. And unfortunately, the negative aspect of that is we're willing, just like the Caucasian, to do whatever it takes to get what we want. Whether it's illegal, whether it's immoral, it doesn't matter to us. We want the ends to justify the means, not because it's good and good for our people, but because personally we can benefit from it. And unfortunately, it goes even to the degree where you have Mexicans who mistreat their own poor Mexican brothers and sisters inside of factories because they know that they're undocumented and don't have papers, so that they know that they can mistreat them, and who are they going to turn to? That's why when you talk to the poor Mexican, when you talk to the poor Puerto Rican brother, not the one that goes to the university, not the one that grew up in the suburbs, but the one who works at Home Depot and is looking for work outside of Home Depot, who builds houses, who lives in a little trailer someplace, they see a bond of unity with the Black man and woman of America because they know and they see that their condition is because of the same enemy that has them in the terrible condition that brought them here to the United States to begin with. Unfortunately, though, a lot of our people don't know. They're just being pushed along by the forces of the enemy, and they know something's wrong, but nobody has informed them with what has caused this situation, but slowly and surely, our people are waking up to the truth. And it really is the Black man and woman of America who've inspired the uprise and the movement of the Mexican people, the Puerto Rican people. You notice all of those organizations you named, the Brown Berets, the Young Lords, it was first the Black Panthers. You start with the Black first. And since the Black man was on the bottom of the society, treated the worst, once they started to rise, then everybody else could rise with them. It's not because we want to misuse them. No, we see the rise and we want to unite with the rise. Now I see today, even the Chinese trying to unite with the Black man. And if you go back to the 60s, read in the newspapers that Mao Zedong had in that part of the world, going back into the 50s and the 60s instead I've seen, or even the 40s, I believe. If you look at what was happening there, they were seeing the rise of Black people. And they said, it's time for the rise of our people all over the planet, because when the most destroyed is getting up, it inspires the rest of the world. And it puts the Black man and woman of America in a special position to be the vanguard in leadership. But in order to be the leadership, you have to understand that you're not the only people who've suffered, though you may have suffered the longest and the worst, all have suffered. And today, your rise is a sign and hope and inspiration for the rest. And they're looking to you not to take your place. Nobody can take your place, but they're looking to you for guidance and solidarity.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I agree. So now what do you think about, there's many people who spew divisiveness amongst us. And some of these people likely have been sent by the government for all we know, but they spew this divisiveness, and this really takes a toll on it, because it seems like with already broken relationships and ties, this only serves to add fuel to the fire. What are your thoughts on that?
Unfortunately for them, if they are allowing themselves to be used by the enemy, this is not the time to do such work, because it's the time of the fall of this wicked world that has misused our people and the rise of a world of righteousness. And you may have received a paycheck. You may have received some trinket or some promise of closeness to the enemy, or some promise of fame and fortune in the future. You won't live long enough to enjoy it. We've been warned by the Honorable Elijah Muhammad and the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan. Now is not the time to be against the unity and rise of your people, because to be against that, it's not Brother Abel's desire. It's not you, dear sister's desire alone. This that is happening, the rise of the Black man and the uniting of the darker people, it's by the orchestration and the will of the Creator, God, Allah himself. So to find yourself opposing the unity or sowing seeds of division amongst what he has come to unite puts you in opposition to God. And that's a dangerous place to be in the day of judgment, because it's in this day that there's a fire waiting for us. I'm not talking about necessarily, a literal fire, but the fire of frustration, the fire of the anger of the people when they find out what you've done. Because don't think for a second that the enemy really wants to show you some favor. They'll use you as long as they can. And then when they're done with you, they'll expose you yourself, and you'll be left in shame and disgrace if you're fortunate enough to get away with your life. Because today, to play with the aspirations and hope of the rise of our people, which they know is only going to be achieved with our unity. To play with that puts you in the position to get the chastisement of God, but also puts you in the position to catch the wrath of the people. And that brother that I mentioned to you earlier, Reyes Tijerina, he loved the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, and he loved Black people so much, and he loved God so much. He named his daughter in Spanish, Ira de Allah. And that means the wrath of Allah. And that's what we're looking at amongst the people in the environment. If we today would sell them out, if we would trick them, if we would misuse them, you're going to see an anger unleashed unlike anything we've ever seen, because they're tired of the open enemy but they're tired of the hypocrites and stool pigeons, Uncle Tom, steel tacos, and all of the madness that we do to ourselves. It's not a good day to be that. And I would encourage any brother or sister, if they gave you a check, if they offered you something, I'd give it back and get right.
That's right.
I try to do what I can to ask forgiveness of your people, atone with your people, expose yourself and try to clean it up before they do. You know what you did that was wrong. Point it out and ask the people to forgive you. Say, I was in a tough position, whatever it was. They made me an offer I couldn't refuse. We all understand they're powerful, but they're not more powerful than God. And when we are on the side of right and decide to do right, God will bless us and the people will forgive us if we're sincere. But if they find out in the other way, in this day and hour, it's a dangerous game to play. Like I said, with the aspirations of the rise and the hope of our people for unity and true liberation.
Absolutely. Make atonement is what they need to do. I absolutely agree. Now, the thing is, I think about what President Biden said. President Biden made a comment saying that the immigrants are the future. Get used to it. Now, I felt as a Black person, that was a direct jab, but I also knew that that was divisive. For him to say that, it would put some Black people in the mindset that the immigrants are coming here to take over. They're going to outnumber us and they're going to be shown favoritism by the Democrats specifically. And I like I said, I feel that this is all just a strategic move on their behalf. They know exactly what they're doing. What are your thoughts on that?
You know, they're wicked, lying hypocrites, because for all of my life, they've been promising the Democrats, and like a dog being led on a leash, that you'll get citizenship, you don't have to worry. We're fighting for you, Mexicans. We're fighting for you. Just stick with us. Oh, if we only had, you know, we won the presidency, but if we had the Congress, we can't pass any legislation to reform immigration without, you know, the House and the Senate and these things. And under Obama, we had all of that under the Democratic rule. And guess what? Nothing got done. And they're trying to just keep stringing us along. And because we have not been taught about who the enemy is or who we are, they continue to string us along, trying to make it think like they'll favor us. Favor us to be what? Top slave in the house? That's no position for somebody who knows themselves. That's not a position to be seeking. But it's just like the Holy Quran says in the time of Pharaoh and Moses, where he brought those and he promised them, Pharaoh, nearness to him if they helped him against Moses. And that's what you see happening. They feared, Pharaoh feared, that the children of Israel were growing in number. And they feared that they would join on to an enemy from outside of their government, if you will, outside of their country, that they would join on to them and come against them, or that they would change their religion. And what we see happening today is both of those happening. There's a unity growing that they can't stop. Every time they make these promises, they break them. Over 700 treaties were made with the indigenous people of the Western Hemisphere, all of them broken. Why are we still trusting them? You believe that they're going to bring immigrants in to do their work and then get rid of those and push them to the back when they're done with them, just like they always have. This is not new. It's nothing to be happy about. It is really the worst of our people that wants to accept such a position because they think they can personally benefit from it, not because they see the masses of our people benefiting from it. And I agree with you absolutely 1000%. It was a shot at Black people. Even after they put Biden in office, he never has answered and completed his promises to them. And he doesn't intend to yet. In 2 years, we'll hear about how the Black folks need to support Biden, how Latinos need to support Biden, how we got to do it because it's so scary what the Republicans do. I don't mind the Republicans. They are honest with their devilishment.
That's right.
It's the Democrats that pretend to be a friend and then kick us in the backside every chance that they get. and then don't even apologize because they know we have nothing to demand of them because we see them as superior to us and we just hope they'll treat us better. That's why the only solution for us is to make a reality for ourselves. And I'll tell you, dear sister, in Chicago, it's beginning amongst the youth. There are groups of young people, some Arab, some Black, some Asian, some Latino, all mixing together, and they're forming their own little colonies. They trade amongst each other. Some of them cook, some of them paint, some of them produce music, some of them are carpenters. They do all of these things and they're not even dealing in money anymore. They're trading and bartering with one another. And they're finding unity amongst one another. And they're doing it with no aspiration of becoming a part of the system. They're calling it going off grid.
Okay, absolutely.
And I love it. And I love it. And I know it's happening in other cities, but it's a sign of the times that the enemy's strength and power is being broken before our eyes. The only thing that they can do now is try to rule us with fear. That's the last tactic they have. And these young people are not afraid.
Absolutely agree with you on that. This is their tactic, fear mongering and sowing seeds of divisiveness. What is his name? I'm sorry, I'm drawing a blank. Edgar Hoover, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
Edgar
Hoover. The guy that I don't know why I'm drawing a blank. J. Edgar Hoover.
J. Edgar Hoover.
Right.
Hoover. Yes,
okay.
Edgar Hoover.
Now, as he said that the greatest fear in America, the greatest fear, not a nuclear bomb threat, but the greatest fear was Negro unity.
Yep.
And so that is why they had the COINTELPRO, the people infiltrating the Black Panther Party, the Nation of Islam. That's why they're sowing seeds of division even today among Black people. And Black leaders have been assassinated. And
That's
the
right.
same thing with the Latin community, with our Black and brown, with our brown brothers and sisters. They're sowing seeds of division. And that's because they fear the unity, as you said. So with us knowing that, what can we do to try to change the tide of the direction to which things are going?
I would say to be ourselves, and at every opportunity, insert knowledge to replace the lie. Because the Holy Quran says that we hurl truth at falsehood till we knock out its brains. Every lie and liar knows the truth, and they think on the truth, and then they manufacture a lie to cover the truth. But when lightning comes, falsehood is ever vanishing, because truth is a light. So we must not be afraid to shine the light of truth, no matter what it costs us. And people can think whatever they want to about our brother Kanye West, Ye, as he's known now. But if we examine what they're tearing him down for, it's not anything to do with his statements of the past. It's that he dared to speak the truth, and that they cannot have. They're not saying he lied. They're labeling him with an ugly label, anti-Semite. We don't even know what the hell that is. And we're over here, he's so anti-Semitic. Oh my God, why is he saying these things?
Right.
I wonder how all these Christians, black, brown, red, yellow, and white, I wonder what they think of Jesus when they read the book of John, the 8th chapter, when he's arguing with the Jews and they're talking about him and his mother and telling him that they're the children of Abraham. And he tells them, no, you're not. If you were the children of Abraham, you would do the works of Abraham. And then they say, well, God is our father. And he said, well, if you love God, you would love me, for I proceeded from the Father. He said, no, you are of your father, the devil.
Absolutely.
And he was a liar and a murderer from the beginning. Is he anti-Semitic? Is Jesus anti-Semitic? See, we're going to have to today face some hard truths. And what they do is they make us afraid to speak the truth while they're present. And we have to. And that's why this man right here, the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan, that's why he's hated and feared, because he's not going to change his language in the face of white people, because it's the truth. It's a disservice to white people to keep making them think that everything's okay, while we foster hatred for them, while we foster fear of them, while we hold a grudge against them. Yet when we're in their presence, we begin shucking and jiving and pretending like everything's okay. No, speak the truth and tell them what you know and how they've hurt you. How else are we going to come to a reconciliation and a healing? That is what we must do. And we can only do that when we're armed with the truth and when we love God and the truth more than we love this finite life which we have. There is no greater giving of our life than to give our life for the truth. It's great to live for it, but if we have to give our life for it, then let our names go down as one who died for the truth. Isn't that better than saying he died in old age, a coward? Isn't that better than saying she lived long and suffered anguish because she could never mount up the courage to speak the truth? That's why I appreciate this platform that you provide, dear sister, because here, if we really want healing, can't be any more lies. It can't be any more holding back. We must speak the truth, not out of emotion, but speak the truth out of a heart and desire to make things better. They may not accept, and they don't want to accept what is being given. But those of us who love God and love our people, we must speak it, and whatever they want to do with us and it, the truth, once we speak it, that's on them, but they can never say we didn't broadcast it and tell it to the world.
That's right. Absolutely. And, you know, I'm going to wrap this up because I have at least 2 more interviews that I would like to do with you. And so I can, well, thank you. Thank you so much. And it is such a pleasure to have you here. But what I want to say in closing is, you know, the sad thing is a lot of our people and a lot of your people as well seem to have colonized minds. Yes. Though they took away the shackles and chains of slavery, they still have many of our people's minds enslaved. And that's what we have to get away from. We have to start thinking, you know, of our own. Stop allowing them to dictate the narratives of our lives and basically telling us what to think. And they do this so well through predictive programming, you know, through propaganda. You know, they say things like Black on Black crime to demonize Black people. And then they show these negative images of Black people throughout different regions of the country, because no matter, or not the country, but the world.
The world, that's right.
That's right. So no matter where we reside on this planet, this system of white supremacy exists and is in power. But at some point, we have to realize that we aid them because we, in fact, give them the power when we work against one another. And we wish so desperately to be accepted by them. The enemy will never accept us. And as Dr. Neely Fuller said, what does white supremacy do with their tools when they're done with them? They break them. And that is what we all, Black and brown people, need to start realizing. That's what we have to realize and accept. They're never going to accept us as one of them. They're going to give some of us a few bones or biscuits or trinkets, you know, maybe a handful of cash or whatever, just to get us to do their bidding. But when they have no more use for us, then they will get rid of us. And also interesting what you said about Kanye, because what I want to add to that is not only has he been demonized and vilified for speaking truth, but so were Michael Jackson.
That's right.
So
that's right.
Prince,
say that, sister.
So were
that's
Sam Cooke. And they all were killed. Okay, people can say what they want, but they were murdered for simply speaking the truth and trying to warn us. I'll never forget Michael Jackson said that Tommy Mottola was the devil, the head of Sony. And you know, before they kill you, what they often try to do is destroy your name. They say hateful things about you. They call Michael Jackson a pedophile. You know,
that's right.
That's right. And so they do things to not only kill you, you know, in the physical, but also to kill your legacy by saying all of these hateful things about you so that people will view you, even after you're gone, as something other than what you in fact were.
And you know, dear sister, it's the same tactic that you find in the Bible. It's the same tactic that the Jews used against Jesus. It's the same tactic. They tried to sully his name. The people were being healed and they brought people and they started accusing him, saying, oh, he's doing it in Satan's name. By the power of Satan, he's killing people. Then they turned the crowd of people who had been helped by Jesus. In 7 days, it went from Hosanna, Hosanna to crucify him. And according to the scripture, it says that the Jews went into the crowd to encourage the people to have Jesus crucified. How did they do that? Could it be that they somehow had the ability to have the public listen to their narratives while others didn't? Could it be that they, in that time, were those who controlled what was the media back then, which there was no television, it was people reporting from word of mouth. Today, it's more sophisticated, but it's the same exact tactic. And they want to put fear in us. If they can break Kanye, if they can make him bow, what will it say to the rest? That's why we thank God for Michael Jackson. We thank God for Prince, for Sam Cooke, for so many of them that stood their ground on the truth. They're not here today, but we're going to keep remembering their names because of what they sacrificed. Their names will live on when all these other weak and punk ones who know the truth but won't speak it, we may like their music today and tomorrow, but they're not going to live on for another generation. No, but their names will live on, just like Muhammad Ali, just like Malcolm X, just like the Honorable Marcus Garvey. Those names are not going to be forgotten. Emiliano Zapata, Pedro Albizu Campos, Jose Marti. These are great names that our people should know. And if they don't, it's a disservice to ourselves because the enemy's never going to teach us about them. But we today have access by way of this media that we now can go through social media and not have to wait for the mainstream media. We can educate ourselves and our people. And if we really knew something about ourselves and learned something about one another, it would be natural and easy to form unity, but it's our ignorance that keeps us divided.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, I want to thank you again, Brother Abel Muhammad. I really appreciate you coming on here, and I look forward to our next interview.
I do as well, Sister Ahmadiyyah, Dr. Ahmadiyyah. I'm so looking forward to it, and I thank you for this honor, and I look forward to the next one.
Well, thank you so much. So with that all being said, I'm going to go ahead and close out, and I'm going to be uploading this on Sunday. Okay, because I wanted to pre-record it so we didn't have any, if we had any technical difficulties and things like that, we could correct it. Yes, but I thank you so much, and I will absolutely send you a copy of this. All right.
Please do, so I can share it as well. Thank you, dear sister. Let me know when you want to do the next one.
Okay, I certainly will. Thank you so much.
Yes, ma'am. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam.